Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. It looks like we're ready to get started. If you have any questions as we go through this webinar, please type them into the questions box on your screen. With that being said, Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. And thank you, Chris, for joining us. We're very lucky to have you. We have Chris Wolfe, who is the Manager of Technical Support and Training at Ray Murray. So wealth of knowledge. Thanks for joining today, Chris.
Oh, thank you for having me. Absolutely, Kyle.
Cool. Well, I think this is we wanted to do this webinar because we see our clients really starting to get keyed into regulators. I feel like I think we'll touch on a number of things today. And again, we try to keep these to about 20 minutes, so we won't be too time consuming for everyone. But we do see it as a focus, and in particular, I'm seeing a lot of our clients having to identifying regulators for existing installations. They're going back and they're looking, there's a move in, move out scenario, they're taking over a customer, and there's issues.
Okay.
But before we jump into the technical side of things, I guess, Chris, can you give us a little bit of, can you talk a little bit about your background in the industry and your role at Ray Murray?
Sure. I started out as a propane helper and developed into a service technician. I was a technician for about 16 years, as well as helping out with deliveries, propane, installed tanks and equipment. And then from there, I got into management with a major marketer and got an opportunity to get into training. So I love the training aspect of this industry. I try and, look forward to helping people, and had an opportunity with Ray Murray. So, Ray Murray is a propane distributor of equipment and parts and accessories. So we have a technical support team here with 3 individuals as well as myself. So we pride ourselves in helping our customers with technical issues when they're out in the field. We're helping them with information, for their job to make it better, as well as training. So we put out a training schedule every year, trying to do different topics. And what we're, again, trying to do is help the industry with information and resources, to make it safe as well as, profitable for their business.
That's great. All right, before we jump in, I just want to show how P3 handles regulators. There's really a couple ways that we handle regulators. We're in the mobile service right now, and in the mobile service, of course, that is part of the safety inspection. And what we're going to do with the safety inspection, I'm going to skip around to the actual regulator section, I hope here. Yep, I'm going to just go to regulators. So when we're in this regulator section, the first thing that we're going to do is, if you're in the field and you're inspecting a regulator that's already expired, we're going to warn you. Obviously, it's going to be way more efficient for you to change out that regulator while you're there, rather than having that information come back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, why is it important? Why are regulator manufacturers' lifespans important?
For safety, regulators are built, and they have moving parts in them. They have springs and diaphragms, and again, these parts are moving every day, and they can wear out, they can deteriorate in certain environments. So I think the manufacturers test their regulators. They put a service life on them, knowing that over time their parts could be degrading and they should be replaced with newer equipment.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's something that we have built into P3. Is all of the regulator manufacturers do in fact have different, there are different lifespans, and all of those are built into P3. You can see Regos with 25 and Fishers with 20, and on and on. Right. The other part of the mobile inspection that we that we're really dealing with regulators is going to be your flow and lockup testing. And your flow and lockup testing, what we're going to do in P3 is as you're inspecting these regulators, I'm going to actually go back and add a leak check here first too, so we can get that cleared. We're going to warn if our flow and lockup is not where it should be. So let me see here. So here, what we do, we're in the mobile service. We have insufficient flow and lockup greater than 30%. Here we're going to point back to the code reference 5411. Lockup should exceed flow plus 30%. Also shouldn't be greater than 14. Why is flow and lockup testing important, Chris?
Yeah, so when the manufacturers, put their regulators together, they're tested at the factory, which is under ideal conditions. So certainly when you get out into the field, certain things come into play with different, loads on the system, line sizing, and it's critical that the technician, as he installs the regulator, is going to check and verify that and make any hopefully minor adjustments, to the gas pressure. And certainly we recommend that when they're checking that pressure, they're checking it at the furthest appliance or possibly the biggest BTU load, just to make sure that the information is accurate. So it's critical that the pressure is set for the appliance, because that's what the manufacturer of the appliance is asking for, usually a minimum and a maximum, and that's where the efficiencies are, with the manufacturer, what they're posting. Also critical with unvented appliance that you have the proper gas pressure to those appliances. If not, you could start to develop, possibly higher levels of carbon monoxide, which we're trying to avoid. And then certainly after you're making your adjustment on your flow pressure, you just want to verify that maybe you didn't put too much pressure in the system and your lockup pressure may exceed 14 inches of water column. 14 inches of water column is a half a pound of pressure, and your appliances state that maximum half a pound of pressure to those controls. So you certainly don't want to exceed 14, and also don't want to exceed the 30%, according to NFPA 54.
Great. All right. So let's get into the review process. So P3 is designed, really creates better tools for people in the field, better tools for your management team. As work comes into the field, this is our test site, so there's a lot going on. But the management team is going to be queued up to review the inspections as they occur. And so here we can see a regulator installation. And Chris, can you talk a little bit about what why do regulators vent? I guess first is the first question.
Okay, the regulator vent has two functions. The first function is for the operation of the regulator. So as the regulator is moving, the moving parts in the regulator to allow gas pressure to flow, the diaphragm must move. So with the diaphragm moving, air is going in and out of that vent to the atmosphere to allow the diaphragm to move. And that's why it's important that regulators are facing down so that they are able to breathe. They don't get covered with bugs or ice or things like that, because again, the diaphragm needs to be able to move and allow air to go in and out of the vent. Second reason would be for a failure of the regulator. So if the regulator should fail, rather than sending excessive pressure downstream of the regulator vent will allow the gas pressure to vent to the atmosphere.
Gotcha. What if, so okay, so they're gonna vent and that's, vent, it's gonna vent gas, and that's hence the setback requirements.
Correct, yes. So NFPA has setback requirements of a minimum of 3 feet away from a window door opening into the building, and also 5 feet in any direction of a source of ignition, air intake, or mechanical vent.
Gotcha. So for this this picture, it's like, if that window does open, if that's not a sealed opening if that's not a sealed window that does not open, it's probably too close to the air conditioner and to the building opening in this case.
Yes, I would agree.
All right, so we see a lot of people going out in there. They are remediating these issues. They're remote venting regulators. And I think our clients can really use some help with that process. So let's take a look at some of these. And these are all captured in our code and compliance summary. So in the code and compliance summary, we're going to see the initial photo. So here is the initial photo. We're going to see the review, vented too close to source of ignition. And then we're going to see the resolution. So here is that regulator. It is in fact remote vented. What can you do? How should people be doing this? What should they be keeping in mind? What's important with this? What do you see with this particular example of remote venting?
Well, some of the key things that are important are when you're remote venting, just make sure that you are meeting the code requirements of the minimum distance to the openings or source of ignition. And then also making sure that you're using code compliant materials for your piping to be able to pipe away. And I think third thing is you want to make sure that the installation looks good and is safe and appropriate, for the customer. So what I see here with this installation, certainly it meets requirements that it appears to be 5 feet away from that air conditioning condensing unit. But I would maybe question as to the installation. Looks like it's just laying on the ground, maybe not being secured, and maybe get trampled or crushed, depending on what that material is. So I think they're hitting some of the marks, but I don't think they're hitting all of the marks on the way possibly it should have been installed, in my opinion.
And you were mentioning, I think there is a manufacturer that does provide kits, venting kits. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So Marshall Excelsior does have a venting kit. It is NFPA 50A compliant, and then it comes in different lengths, but it's packaged as a complete kit that gives you all the accessories that you can remote vent in a nice little package.
Otherwise, you should be using conduit, electrical conduit.
That's correct. So in an NFPA 58, it gives you the materials that you are allowed to use, and it also tells you what you cannot use. So one of the main pieces of material is a conduit. So it states that it must be, PVC must be UL 651 compliant, which is conduit. They make lengths of 10 foot. Hard conduit, they also make a flexible conduit, and that is approved for venting regulators.
Gotcha. Do you have any tips of like fasteners that you might use for attaching it to the house, or do you see is there anything that people tend to gravitate or that has worked well for you?
Yeah, I've noticed that, the manufacturer of the conduit, they do make their own plastic straps.
Okay.
So a lot of times if you're going to match to the conduit, it would make the installation look a lot nicer. And as well as there is no code requirement on how far the spacing should be with your anchors or your strap material. But again, I think, it's good industry standard to, maybe every 2-3 feet, just to make sure it is secure and, again, looks good for the customer.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a look at another one. Okay, so here's another one. See this issue. We can see vented too close to source of ignition, and really here with this building opening, and I'm kind of leaning in towards my computer screen. It needs to be the building opening, really, for it to be an issue, would have to be below the vent, correct? So we might be okay with the door, but probably not to the AC unit there.
Yeah, I would agree. As long as the vent is below the opening, that is satisfactory according to code. But to your point, it appears that we are a little too close to that condensing unit.
Okay, and then we're going to look at the actual resolution. So what do you see with this remote vent installation?
A couple of concerns I may have there. It appears that there might be just standard white Schedule 40 PVC vent material, which again is not code compliant. Also appears that the venting is going uphill. So if there would be a condensation issue, it would collect, at the lowest point, which would actually be in that vent. One other thing I may add is, if it is possible, rather than remote venting, if you can actually move the regulator, that you wouldn't have to put the venting on, would probably be a better choice when it comes to having to, make the regulator compliant.
Gotcha. Yeah, you were mentioning, as we were talking earlier, that if you're remote venting a Rego regulator, there's some things you need to keep in mind.
That's correct. So when you have a Rego regulator, the cover that's at the vent, it's a little black plastic piece, and that is the actual suppressor for the regulator that stabilizes the diaphragm. So when you are remote venting a Rego regulator, you have to ensure that when you remove that plastic cap from the vent, you must reinstall it at the end of the termination of that remote vent. Some of the other manufacturers have just a wire screen, whereas they have an internal stabilizer built into the regulator. So the vent termination for remote venting can just be a wire mesh screen, which there are some manufacturers in the industry make that component. But just want to reiterate that for a Rego regulator, you must use that cap and put it at the end of the termination to stabilize the function of that regulator. If not, you will have fluctuation in your gas pressures.
Wow. Well, that's some really great information, Chris. I don't know if there's, Jane, has there been any, does anyone have any questions?
One came in asking about the mobile inspections. Do you need an internet connection? Our service area is very rural.
Yeah, so we're gonna go back to our mobile service here. And so that we were looking earlier at the safety inspection. There is another, there's a bunch of inspections built into P3. Let me just back out of this here. With P3, the mobile service, you can see right here, I was using it in offline. I do have an inspection queued up. I'm not gonna send it, but you are able to work in P3 offline. That was one of the early on, one of the big challenges that we face is exactly that. We have clients that are operating in rural areas, and this does work seamlessly without an internet connection. What it does is it'll queue up your inspections, and you can either send them once you get a connection. I'm going to turn on my mobile service here. I'm going to say send unsent. You have one inspection is not sent. Would you like to send them now? Yes, and we can do that. And that's going to work for all of the functionality here. So as I mentioned, that was a safety inspection we're stepping through earlier. The interruption of service is really going to be if you're out and you're modifying the system. So if you're going to do anything that's not a complete inspection, that's going to be the interruption of service. So here we can say we've got a regulator replacement. At this point, we're going to, of course, enter our leak check, and I'm going to do that. We're going to continue. Okay, so here I do have error recognition. It's built into that reason. Because I was replacing a regulator, I should be doing flow and lockup. So I'm going to be warned on that. I'm not going to continue. I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And now I'm going to continue. So here, if there is information on the account, this is a test account, as you can tell for us, you're going to be able to select it. So here I can see the regulator. I'm going to go ahead and replace that, and I'm going to be queued up to input the new information. I can step through this quickly. Let's see, I'm going to have to move these webinar controls so I can get to the rest of it. Our inspection. Again, with our inspections, we always have our mobile professor. So if we don't understand what we're looking for, that's going to help us. Now I can continue. I'm going to email this to myself. We're going to do our sniff test. Now we're going to be able to preview that interruption of service inspection. We'll say the customer wouldn't be home for this one. And our service person's gonna sign it. We're gonna save it. All that information is gonna go right into P3. And I'm gonna bring over my email here. Maybe did that come through already? Yeah. And here's the actual. Oh, it's coming on my third screen here. And here's the actual inspection that we just stepped through together. So yes, sorry, I kind of went at it there, but yes, it does work offline is the answer.
Awesome. And then the next question is, are outlets considered ignition sources?
Outlets as in like a 110 outlet on the outside of the house?
I'm guessing there's no, they didn't specify here.
I'm assuming that would be the question, is if you have just a regular outlet of 110 to plug in a light or something. That would really be depending on your company policy, whether they would consider that a source ignition or not. So you would want to consider that. Would it spark on its own, or would it only spark when somebody is plugging in a cord or unplugging a cord? Certainly a GFI outlet, could spark at any time if there is a fault in the system. But a regular plug, from a cord will only spark. So I would say, I don't know if there's really a right or wrong answer for that. There's nothing in the code that specifies that. That's something you might want to determine with a local inspector or within, your own company, how you want to determine that.
Kind of a gray area.
It is, yes.
Got it. Okay. And then another question is, what if ignition source is above the vent? Is the 5 feet rule still in place?
That is correct, because with the 5-foot rule, it's in all directions. So it's a big circle of 5 feet all the way around the vent of that regulator. Whereas for a door, window, or opening, it's anything below the vent. So it's all directions on a source of ignition, air intake, or mechanical ventilation. It's in all directions, yes.
You had
Great.
some recommendations, Chris, right, about not installing regulators too low to the ground based on snow. Like that can be an issue as well.
Yeah, correct. So whether it's really, and I think, the NFPA 58 for years said 12 inches above the ground would be the vents. Now they're saying anticipated snow level. So you just want to, depending on, you're not going to have 12 inches maybe in the southeast, but you may certainly in New England. So it really is going to depend on your area as to where you want to, terminate that vent.
Great. And that is it for the questions that we got.
So Chris, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, how would they, just through the helpline, or is there specific contact information that we can add to this posting for people, or what should they do if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, certainly they can send me an email or call me direct on my direct line, here at Ray Murray Incorporated, and I can provide that information if you want to add that later, Kyle. One other thing I wanted to mention real quick before we wrap up is just sizing of the vent. Certainly we don't want to reduce the sizing of the vent. It's typically 3/4 inch on a second stage regulator, and you want to continue to that 3/4 inch. If you're going to vent over 15 feet, most manufacturers will recommend that you upsize that vent line one size if you have to go further than 15 feet. So I just wanted to, we didn't get the opportunity earlier to mention that, but I wanted to mention that before we ended here.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, we'll make sure to attach, we'll upload this video to our YouTube channel. We'll make sure to attach your contact information. And we appreciate you joining and your time today, Chris, your wealth of knowledge, and certainly everyone that's on the call, we appreciate that. Appreciate your participation as well. And if you have any questions, just you can follow up with us directly. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.